All right. I'm going to do something different today. Going to open some Babylon 5. I think it's fun to open things from the 90s. However, these are not particularly valuable things because it's a dead card game. And if you've listened to the Magic Historian or Rudy at Alpha Investments or a couple of other people talking about dead card games in relation to the hype cycle of new indie card games and how long they last, and you're aware of it yourself, then you'll know that a lot of card games have died more than have succeeded, way more than have succeeded. When Magic first came out in the 90s, it was, the first collectible card game, and it was a wildfire, for the time. Baseball cards were going crazy because of, overprinting and variants and stuff like that. And Wizards came up with this new collectible game that you could play, and it was meant to play in between sessions of Dungeons and Dragons. At first, amongst, teenagers my age who were gamers, they got into it immediately, but by and large, the general populace did not get into them. Maybe Pokemon, which was a year or two later, that might have brought in a more general audience, as it does today. And then, basically, there was an explosion of different card games that ran the gambit from different things, from the original game based on Vampire the Masquerade, which was called Jihad at the time, and then they changed the name. Then there were spoof games. There were, much more, granular games than Magic the Gathering, and everyone was trying to reinvent the wheel. Even TSR, the company that made Dungeons & Dragons, prior to being purchased by Wizards of the Coast, made one, maybe two collectible card games. The one that I remember wasn't all that great. I got it because I like Dungeons & Dragons, but compared to Magic the Gathering or anything else out there, it just wasn't, the greatest. Then along came Babylon 5, which was one of my favorite shows at the time, especially once Season 3 hit. I had watched Babylon 5 for Season 1 and Season 2, but if you were to go back and binge it, it's a difficult slog through Season 1, and unfortunately, there are some shows that you could say, hey, starting this season, that's where it gets good. But with Babylon 5 being probably the first serialized show that wasn't a mini-series or a TV movie type thing, it was a concept for a show for 5 years by J. Michael Straczynski, and it had an overarching story. So in the first season, there are little nuggets that are dropped in that come into play later. So unfortunately, almost every episode is like that, and there's very few episodes you can skip, even though the first season is, still under the old model of television of the episode kind of almost resets where the people are at for the next episode, because it's non-serialized, and the networks wanted people to be able to jump in at any episode and start watching the show. So the serialized nature of Babylon 5 really hits, and the story starts to become more apparent in Season 3 and becomes just way, way better. So it's worth the slog through Season 1 and Season 2. It's hard to convince people to do that. So Babylon 5 already being a niche TV show in network TV, because it wasn't even really a network thing. It was, I think, WB, or it went through a bunch of different hands of rights owners trying to get it. They were third-party people making content for networks, and that was one of the things with Babylon 5. So it had a tough slog to even stay on the air. So having that and a niche audience doesn't, bode well for a collectible card game, other than the fact that collectible card games were kind of all the rage in the late 90s. So it apparently did quite well, and it was well supported by the company that made it. But then it failed. And how did it fail? Well, WB, Warner Brothers, wanted more money for the license, and the company didn't want to pay it or couldn't pay it. Who knows? We don't know necessarily the specifics. This is just things that people have said over the years. Some people that have been with the company. A friend of mine mentioned that he spoke to people that had been with the company that had said something like this, and I did read that the license was pulled by Warner Brothers. So that's the likely reason. And why does that matter? Well, we have Lorcana with a license to make Disney cars. Now, the people that are talking about Lorcana are, kind of missing the point that licenses aren't always and aren't even often in perpetuity. Some are, as long as the people that have the license are continuing to make the content. I think that's generally the case for TV shows and movies. In the case of Spider-Man, as long as Sony keeps making Spider-Man stuff, they get to keep the license. But if a certain amount of time goes by, then they lose license. Whereas with Universal and Hulk, because they're a distributor, they don't have to make Hulk content, but the minute that Disney does make a primarily Hulk movie, they get to distribute it. That seems to be in perpetuity. Now, obviously, Disney has shown that they don't like these licensing contracts, and they don't want them to go on forever. I mean, you had the original company that made Star Wars toys, but this wasn't under Disney. This was Lucasfilm. Later, Hasbro is making the Star Wars toys, and they have licensed other Disney-owned things like Marvel as well. I don't know if those are in perpetuity contracts. Probably not. At some point, Disney might farm around the idea of other people doing the licensing once that license expires. But that's the thing. So, Lorcana, the license is probably going to expire. And then Ravensburger will have to either pay more for it, less for it, the same for it, or Disney might even decide, we don't even want the collectible card game, it's not helping our IP. That is a possibility. And therefore, Lorcana could end up like Babylon 5. I mean, Babylon 5 is probably my favorite card game, but it's dead, and it's not supported by anything, and it's so dead that like these things are dirt cheap, and it's so dead that the deluxe edition, the premier edition was the first set, and then they had expansions, much like any other card game. This was a reprint set of the premier edition, called the deluxe edition, where it fixed any issues with the rules and stuff like that. So this kind of insert here has your list of cards, which is nice that you can check off, but also the rules and erratas, and the cards themselves have been the wording has been changed to suit the new rule system that came through the OPC. So it's a dead card game, and Lorcana could be that. And pardon me, I dropped the insert card, which I guess is kind of like a box topper, but not really. It's more of a promo card because it's not in a randomized booster case. I don't know how much that matters, especially to the card game that has no value. So as I said, I got these at a distributor. So the fact that a distributor had a bunch of Babylon 5 card boxes from 1997 sitting around can tell you how dead a card game can get. And I believe when I requested these, it actually took them a little bit to figure out how many they had and where they were. So they'd been sitting around for quite a while without anybody really ever ordering them. So how many there are in existence, I don't know. And whether or not it was like a huge glut and it's just slowly been dwindling over the years, or just people completely forgot about it, and these last little boxes just sat on a shelf, and for whatever reason the distributor kept the listing on their website even though it was very, very old. I mean, it's great that they didn't just, destroy them, because they figured no one would ever buy them. But the card game's dead, and it's entirely possible that Lorcana could end up that way, regardless of how great the game is, because this is a great game. So just keep that in mind when you're buying Lorcana, that, you know, it may not stand the test of time. It could. I mean, Disney products are pretty great. A lot of them do stand the test of time. But card games generally don't, and that includes a lot of the other indie card games as well. No matter how great their game is, at least they don't have a license that can be revoked, so they can continue to print it, and as long as it continues to be popular, then it can continue to sell, and they can continue to support it, and that sort of thing. So they don't have that negative against them. But with a licensed product like Lorcana, it's kind of a crapshoot. And then you add to the fact that, like, even this company knew to, you know, shrink wrap the cases, even though they didn't put any sort of branding or anything like that. So, you know, it would be possible, if these had ever been valuable, to, I guess, re-shrink wrap them yourself if you had the right, you know, the right soft plastic as opposed to like the hard crinkly plastic. So you could repack them, but no one would ever do it because, again, they're not valuable enough to fake it. So at least that's one of the bonuses of buying a dead card game is, you know, people aren't going to go out of their way to rip you off because they feel they're already ripping you off because it's worthless. So I'm going to get into the opening here, and this is the promo card, I guess, Rogue Telbath. And so some of them, something like 1 in 20 boxes or something like that, has a signed card from one of the principal actors of the show. Not all of them were paid to sign a bunch of cards, but Claudia Christian was one of them, and I believe Peter Jurassic, the guy that played Wanda Malari, also. So let's get into this. I have not opened a pack. I've never opened a pack specifically of the deluxe edition. I opened Premier Edition cards, and that's pretty much the only cards that I had. And I still have a bunch of them. But I've not opened a booster pack from the 90s in a long, long time. So this is the back. It's very simple. It's nice, but, you know, nothing wow about it. But they're well-made cards. I don't know, are there foils? I don't know, I don't remember. So basically, it takes things that happen in the show and throws in screenshots. So it doesn't even really have art. So all they had to do was, you know, take screenshots. And then, you know, most of it was in the, I guess, design. So how does that screenshot relate to, and what was happening in the screenshot relate to what the card is doing, and then it has to be balanced and that sort of thing. I don't even know. These at the end are just fleets. I can't remember what. I watched someone else do a box opening, and there were rares. I don't know if it's the color of the card that tells. No, the colors are different things like events or people and that sort of thing. So I don't really even know what the rare is. Because it doesn't really matter what the rare is, because I don't think any of these cards are really worth anything. I mean, you might see listings for them on eBay. You know, it's hard to find, so therefore it's worth money. Or at least they're trying to sell it to you for that much, and maybe people will buy it for that much. But, you know, you're not going to find a lot of people to play this card game with, so what would be the point? Now, I will say this, these booster packs are actually really easy to open compared to some of the, you know, the Magic ones that in the last few sets, especially the most difficult, I think, were the Commander Masters ones. I mean, especially the collector boosters, because they had, you know, they had a very upscale booster pack lining on the inside that that made it extra difficult to open them. But these ones just kind of crack open really easily. Now, if you're familiar with Babylon 5, then you'll know what you're looking at. But if you're not familiar, I'll give you kind of a general overview of the series. So basically, the elevator pitch is Lord of the Rings in space. And that's the shortest way to go about it. Then the longer pitch is that the humans, started space travel, and I believe the first species they interacted with were the Centauri, which are these people. That's Londo with a toy of Londo being sold on their marketplace on the space station. Anyway, so the humans get into space. There's other species that have already been in space, and there's varying degrees of technology, because certain species have been in space for millions of years, and this current species that are most active, the oldest one is the Minbari, which have been in space for probably a couple thousand years. So they're way ahead of Earth, right? And Earth doesn't even encounter the Minbari at first. They just hear about the Minbari, and they trade with other nations, especially the Centauri, which are the first species they meet. And the Centauri kind of, rip them off in trade because, they're new in space and it's easy to rip them off. And then there's a couple of wars between, minor species, and the humans help out against a group called the Dilgar, which are particularly aggressive, and that kind of wins influence for Earth, and they're seen as being a very helpful species. So the humans then try to locate the Minbari, because they got great technology, and obviously the humans want to trade with them. But the Minbari are an isolationist species, and they're very haughty. They're like space elves. They don't really... They want to decide the side of contact. They're kind of like the Vulcans in Star Trek 2, that they have a particular way of going about things, and they hold themselves above others, and they think that you can't influence new species too much, or else things could go wrong. They're not as enlightened as them, that sort of thing. So eventually the humans encounter a Minbari ship, with the ship that they're sent to go look for the Minbari. But due to a misinterpretation of culture, the humans end up firing on Minbari's ship and, destroying the ship and killing their leader, which sends the Minbari into a frenzy. They're a structured society of each part of their society is part of 1/3 of their society. There's warrior, priest, and worker classes. So the warrior class and the priest class basically combine to wipe out the humans, and there's a massive Minbari war, and the humans are outclassed because they can't even target the Minbari ships because their technology is so far ahead of them. And eventually the Minbari get to Earth, and they're still in their frenzy, but then they start to rethink what it is they're doing, and due to a confluence of events, they decide to surrender, even though they practically wiped out humanity at this point, but they haven't invaded Earth. And eventually, they decide that they need to communicate more, and everyone in the galaxy should probably communicate more. And also, there's probably some darkness coming, so they should prepare for that, which sets them on this quest to basically get the humans to build a space station sort of on the crossroads of the galaxy where every species can come together and talk. Now, the first 4 space stations all had various problems, and they didn't complete their construction, or they were destroyed or disappeared or whatever. And eventually, the 5th station, the 5th Babylon station, basically did manage to survive, and that's where the show takes place, on a crossroads in the galaxy where the species come together, and they do a lot of diplomatic, political, and commercial intrigues. And that's kind of what the game is about, is that you can win the game based on your commercial exploits, your influence, or just, physical conquest. So that's the sort of political basis of the game, of the show. Then in the background is this thing called the Shadow War. So the Shadows are an even more ancient species than the Minbari, and they once tried to dominate the galaxy and force people to play by the rules that they came up with, but eventually they were defeated with the help of other ancient species and the Minbari, and that was over 1,000 years ago, and there's a prophecy that they're going to return and try it again, and the Minbari are secretly trying to work with the humans to stop that from happening. So that is an undercurrent to the show, and for the first 2 seasons, a lot of that is just mythology, as in the characters that are involved in it can't really, it's difficult for them to convince other people that this shadow thing is really a thing. And then by the 3rd season, it's very apparent to most of the main characters that it is a thing, and then different characters have taken different stances, and they have different perspectives and outlooks, and they are in conflict with each other, which is where a lot of the great story elements of the show, come from. And finally, by I believe it's the mid-4th season, the Shadow War has resolved, but then in the midst of all this stuff that was happening, there was a coup on Earth where the vice president took over and turned Earth into basically a fascist regime, and then the humans have to fight a civil war to get their freedoms back with the help of Babylon 5. So there's a lot in the show, and it's pretty awesome, and these cards do a very good job of at least the first 3 or 4 seasons making you feel like you're playing out the story in your own way. And so the way the game works is you play one of the 4 main factions in the show: the humans, the Minbari, the Centauri, or the Narn. And each of them has a different play style, because each of them has a different outlook, as I mentioned on the show, and different technologies. So your play style is different, and your goals are different, and it was probably the first 4-player collectible card game, and it expanded to more than 4 players when they brought in other factions in later expansions. But I think it's best with the 4 players. And then you play around the table, and you're trying to do your thing, and you're trying to stop the other person from doing their thing if it either interferes with your thing, or if if they're getting too close, or you perceive they're getting too close to their goals. So, it has those elements of the game. And each of the factions are just really cool. My favorite being probably the Centauri or the Minbari. In the show, definitely the Centauri are my favorite. But in the game, the Minbari are staid and boring in the show, but they are, obviously pretty unbeatable when it comes to physical combat. And that is one booster pack of Babylon 5, and I think I've rambled on enough. You should go check out maybe clips from the show, see if it's something you'd like. Maybe, I don't know, try to binge it, try to get through Season 1. Let me know if you've watched it, or if you're finding it hard to get through Season 1. Maybe other people in the comments can encourage other people to do so, because I think a lot of people should watch this show. It's just very, very good. And then, well, I don't know. I don't necessarily recommend going out and buying packs of this game, because, again, it's not supported, and all you're really going to get is, I don't even, especially not the expansions, because I don't think I ever played with the expansions, and apparently the expansions got more and more, they brought in better cards, and therefore if you didn't have the new expansion, you wouldn't win a game This is what I've been told. I don't know because I didn't play really with the other expansions. So I don't necessarily recommend going out and buying this game unless it's something that really appeals to you. I mean, the booster boxes are pretty cheap considering they're from the 90s and they're, I think you can probably get these for what, 40 US on eBay, maybe more, and probably no more than 60 US, and then you add in shipping. And then the expansions, because some of them were printed less, and obviously this is the only thing that was ever available still at distribution. So they're a bit more, but I don't think they go past much past $100, and certainly not past $200. Certainly not like a comparable box from Magic the Gathering, which anything from the 90s, short of the really overprinted ones, are in the thousands, some in the tens of thousands. So it is something that you could acquire, but do you want to? There's not many people playing it. I'm just opening it because it's something that I really enjoy. And it gives me a chance to talk about the show, which is easily accessible because you can, I have it on Google Play. I bought all the episodes, and then I bought, 15, 20 years ago, I bought the DVD box set, and then, 2 years ago, I bought the Blu-ray box set. So I can access it pretty much anywhere, and I can watch it whenever I want. So I would say go buy the Blu-rays. That's probably the thing that would be best, rather than getting it on a digital service. Although it allows you to watch it anywhere, but I don't know. The Blu-rays are good because they have all the extras and stuff like that. So go watch Babylon 5, and I'll probably open another one of these later on the channel. Especially if there's interest in it. Probably also if there's no interest in it. Just because I like opening it, and I bought a bunch of them. And myself and my nephew who run the store will be playing it, and maybe, hopefully, we can find 2 other people to join in so we can have a good 4-player game of Babylon 5. And of course, I have some friends from high school that they probably still have their Babylon 5 cards, and I messaged them on Facebook about me getting these, so maybe they'll stop by the store sometime and play these. One of them mentioned that they wanted to have a draft, and certainly do that, but he's in Japan, so his ability to get here and be at the store and play is pretty limited. But I would look forward to playing it with my old friends a game that we used to play in the 90s. And I'm looking forward to getting at least 3 more players into it so that I can have sort of regular, semi-regular play sessions of it. So, check out the show. Check out the card game, see if it's something you like. Let me know what you think.